Hi, Vidya.
Hey, Mike,
Do you know what the first secret is to being a good CTO?
let me guess. I don't know, actually.
You have to not doom scroll while you're waiting for all of your agents to finish. That's what I
Wow.
learned from my conversation with Clayton.
Who would have thought? Well, this is what makes this conversation that we just had with Clayton so interesting. So, Clayton Kim was the founder and CTO of a health and wellness company called FlyKit. He is your engineer's engineer, the quintessential hacker in so many different ways. And he talks about tips like these that Mike just talked about and how to be a CTO in this new age of AI. Let's jump right into it.
I'm going to introduce you in an unusual way because you once gave me a masterclass in bench pressing, and there's very few engineers and technical people in general I would trust with that activity. So, in my mind, when I think of you, you're always associated with health and fitness that really runs counter to the stereotypes of our profession. I'm curious to start there. What has that journey been like? You were into fitness and sports obviously from a young age. How did that feel when you also went into technology? Did you find yourself surrounded by like-minded people? Not so much. What was that like?
It's funny you say that because in my mind, and probably because I've spent so many years in like health and performance tech, it's like every tech bro in the last couple of years has been trying to live forever or optimize their health in some way. So I feel as though, I might have been a little bit earlier on that train, but I feel as though tech people have aligned themselves to that performance lifestyle in the last several years. I started off as a normal athlete, played football, soccer, wrestled, rowed in high school, boxed through college, played rugby through all my 20s, and then like kind of later in life discovered Circus. And so I've spent the last about 8, 10 years, give or take, working on like a professional skill set in acrobatics and circus. And so I am a high level aerial straps artist. I would say like pretty good Sear wheel artist. And then as I'm aging out of aerial straps, I'm trying to do the Indiana Jones idle swap with hand balancing. And so I've spent the last year plus working on my one arm handstand. Hopefully we'll get it within the next couple of weeks. This is the last little push. And then probably like 2 years before I'd be able to like perform it on stage at any real level. So very, very good at being very bad at stuff for a long time is probably the only way I've been able to progress through these things. And I've tried to bring along technology wherever I could with this. My background in undergrad was sleep research, and so sleep obviously has a huge part to play in all of health and performance. Joining Founts and really trying to bring like scalable expert level knowledge to people for their health and performance, whether that's like around blood work or supplements or diet or sleep and how it all plays together. Like I've been trying to do that for the last several years now. Culminating in what I'm doing for FlyKit and then working on a couple of AI projects here and there, kind of in and around that space. But I think at this point, I've gathered a really mature view on how to actually impact health and performance and ways that technology can and can't help that.
And it almost sounds like the view of health as an individual is what is leading, and then how to apply technology to that is following in your career. It's not like you set out to be an engineer. You set out to learn about sleep or health, and then you followed by solving problems.
Yeah, exactly. And, this might be a function of me being very jaded in this space, but there's only so much technology can do to actually solve health and performance. Like there's some recent miracles in the form of GLP-1s and a few other kind of peptides that are coming to market. A lot of good research around decent research and good hype around Ruta and stuff like that. Outside of the occasional miracle, there's turns out a lot of it is just human behavior and psychology that isn't going to be solved by strapping something to your wrist or sleeping on a magic bed.
That's awesome. I am extremely excited to jump in a little bit deeper into the industry insights with you and how you see things from this mature standpoint that you've developed by now, a little bit later in this hour. Before we do, let's go back for a second to when you were just starting out in tech. You were actually not a formally trained software engineer, if I understand correctly. You were a data scientist to begin with.
And even before that, I was a law school dropout. So the story goes like I was in law school doing mostly analysis work. So I got out of all of the kind of normal legal work that all of my fellow law students had to do in their internships, because it turns out like I was really good at Excel. I was good at stats. I can run analysis scripts. And so I was just doing that for law firms instead and actually charging it a really good billable rather than, working for peanuts as you normally would as
Can I pause you there for a second? How did you earn that first dollar? You're surrounded by a bunch of lawyers and you're also like coding. How do you get somebody to pay you for a script?
Well, I went down the normal path of finding law firms or judges or whatever to intern with, and then just kind of organically within that, you see people struggling with Excel or putting together financial models or running stats on stuff. You're like, hey, I actually know a bunch about this. Can I help you there? And then that actually ended up becoming my full job. And I worked for this federal judge who gave me he and his clerk gave me the best career advice I ever had, which is get the hell out of law. You are too technically forward. You're too creative for this. This industry will crush your soul because it is one that, very much values the inertia. And, the adage goes in his court, creative attorneys end up in prison because they get a little bit too creative with the law. And so I took that advice, dropped out, joined a dev shop / agency as an analyst. This was right around the time big data was starting to become a real word. The term data scientist had just been coined, and then taught myself how to code, started writing like small APIs to do A/B testing and stuff to automate Facebook ads and stuff like that. And then, ultimately was able to call myself a data scientist, and then develop the engineering chops to really back that up.
Vidya, that comes from your world a lot too, right? You've been around those early data science days when people are still figuring out what that term means and how to hire for it and how to build for it.
Yeah, and in fact, in about, I think, 2012, 2013, Clayton, I hired my first data scientist at a startup that I was working at. And I remember the person I was trying to hire, she was a mathematician by training. And she refused to be called a data scientist. She kept saying, look, I'm a math grad. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what you mean by data scientist. And I had budget for a data scientist, not a mathematician. And I was trying to tell her what you're doing is what people are beginning to call data science. So it's fascinating, your journey. So we'll double click on that, Clayton. I'm curious to hear how you see that role having evolved and changed these days.
Yeah, I mean, back then, it was both like completely unbound on like what a data scientist is. I think now the industry has matured and started calling them, fairly specific roles. Different company cultures will yield different things. Like at Meta, a data scientist might look a lot more like a analyst at other companies, while they have specific like AI engineers or ML engineers and like core science and stuff like that. And so I think the industry has really matured in calling out separate functions for what used to be, in totality data science. And so I think at one end you have like your classic kind of like business analyst, and some companies will still call them data scientists, but they do a lot more on the analytics side of things. And then at the very extreme end, you have like research people who some companies still call data scientists, probably less so now since they're all like AI scientists now. But for a long time, data science consumed that entire gamut. Where I really sat was I was a good data engineer, distributed systems engineer, and like machine learning engineer. So I've done a lot of like the research of like model fitting and like model development, but where I really shined was like, can you get 1 million queries per second through the system in a way that is reliable almost all of the time? You have a lot of visibility into it, and you have good tooling to like swap in and out models and evaluate it, which turns out to be really handy in these days, because you have like LLMs, which are big model black boxes, and all you have is the infrastructure to evaluate and swap in and out and change out the harnesses. And so, coming from a functional programming background, it's like, oh yeah, like we've been doing this shit forever. We're now just like attaching better, like more words to it, but it's basically the same thing.
100%.
It's interesting that you mentioned an extension, like what's happening now is an extension of what's already happened. I think you have a more of a front row seat to that than some others because you have a history of just building things just because, right? So you've been doing that for a long time to lead your career. But I'm interested because we want to make this really as valuable as we can for people that are in those shoes, either building or thinking about building and thinking about partnering with someone as a technical founder. And so looking back from your current position, where having built the team, having built up this business, multiple businesses as CTO, is that where you were aiming at the time? Or were you just solving whatever problem is in front of you? And I suppose to extend that and to give that a little bit more direction, like when you were at that dev shop, they took a chance on you, you're building stuff. How did you from there, at that point you're a software engineer, from there, how were you thinking about your next move?
Back then I looked at my career very much in the sense of like traditional like software engineers where you get good at your thing, you start leading people, you become a manager, and then you become a senior manager and a director and like move yourself up the manager chain. I did that. Like, so I was head of data science at Localytics. I went on to Wayfair where I managed several dozen people. And then I realized I was in meetings for 8 hours a day arguing over little fiefdoms. And when I realized that I hadn't written a line of code in 6 months, I was I hate this. And so I actually made a lateral move and switched over to being a principal data scientist. So got to be a lot more hands-on, got to be an IC again. And that was way better. You'll see companies kind of adopt this as they get larger because what they realize is that they suddenly, when you promote your best software engineer to be an engineering manager, you've suddenly taken the person who is the best at something and put them in a position to be terrible at a arguably more important thing because they've given them zero training on actually how to be a good manager. It's a completely different skill set. And so companies that do a good job of having a good IC track, I think, are in a better position to succeed now, especially as organizations flatten with the way modern companies are building things where we're seeing companies left and right getting rid of that middle layer of management and having VPs and a bunch of people underneath them, everyone shipping versus, managers of managers of managers arguing over stuff, getting consensus before anything is allowed to be built because the actual expensive part was code. And now the cheapest part is code. And so everyone should be building and gaining consensus through the building process, and therefore you need fewer managers. I think the pendulum's probably going to swing a little bit too far there, where people realize there's important things that managers do in terms of unblocking people, mentorship, developing careers, dealing with the politics and being the shit umbrella for the teams. But in the meantime, I think the flattening of organizations is absolutely the right move for the industry. And then, we'll wait for things to kind of return to the mean a little bit as dust settles from all the AI stuff.
Do you think it's important to develop that self-awareness as a potential technical co-founder early on? So if I am to create a scenario, I'm an engineer, I meet somebody at a co-working space, they're like, hey, I have a great idea that I want to build. We talk, there's some professional chemistry and we think that this can happen. Do you think that it's a good conversation to have early on? Hey, I am just even with yourself, I want to be building for life versus I want to grow into a management leadership position?
I think people's opinions about this change. I've seen firsthand a lot of people pursue the management track because they enjoyed it and they enjoy the people management and the mentorship and, the hiring, the team building and all those aspects that you don't really understand the ins and outs of it until you've been in it for a few years. And it's hard to tell, I'm a good small company CTO. I would be a terrible giant company CTO, right? It's a completely different skill set. It's a very different skill set. I am highly technical, multidisciplinary. So I design, I code, I do product, I do marketing. I do the ad buying for San Diego Circus Center. I just solve whatever problem needs to be solved in front of me. Versus if you are a big company CTO, I like to think about it as the difference between you're playing Call of Duty as an IC or you're playing Starcraft as an executive, and not even playing Starcraft, but you're telling multiple people how to play Starcraft, where you like are managing resources and economy and the meta of things, and not necessarily like getting to solve problems in a hands-on way where you ultimately kind of like lose track of the original problem. And I think especially now, as the velocity of change in this industry is where like it's happening so fast. Like within 60 days, you had Manus being acquired, Claude Code rising to like its cultural peak, and then OpenClaw happening and being like acquired by OpenAI, all within 60 days. And if you are not actively building at least side projects during that, like you're going to be left behind. If you're not like chronically online and building things during that time period, like you will have lost like an entire generation of like industry advancement. And so it's really hard to do that when all you're thinking about is like quarterly budgets and engineering, like, you know, OKRs and like shit like that.
Do you think, if we keep this question in and I don't get killed for it on LinkedIn, do you think middle managers, if they're relatively younger, should start quitting their jobs, or at least like proactively spending time on learning and building, because their current job is very unlikely to remain useful?
I think that, like I said, the industry will likely overcorrect in the short term, but as the cost of code approaches zero, your ability to gather consensus managing upward, and then whether you're managing 5 people or a fleet of 20 agents, that's going to quickly become very commoditized, the actual boots on the ground work per se. And so I would say for those middle managers, the advice that I would give is stay hands-on in your ability to orchestrate agents and do work across multiple disciplines. But ultimately, the ability to communicate clearly in a cross-functional way, that's not going away. Like, that's the reason why I learned how to design and like deal with business people, and like why I took improv classes and voice lessons in Boston, because I needed a way to be able to communicate better to executive leadership. I needed to be better at commanding a room. When you're talking to a designer, like it's easier to communicate with a designer in design language than, you know, trying to like just say like make this button pop, right? Like that's useless. And so the more ways that you're able to deftly communicate across people, that'll lend itself better to you commanding agents while also collaborating with other human beings who are also probably commanding agents. So yeah, the soft skills are going to become more important as the harder technical skills will distill down to like a few kind of wizard architects within an org that really just enable the tooling for everyone else to be independent and are making like kind of the harder architectural decisions while everyone else is basically going to be shipping in some way or another.
Cool. Maybe we can use this bridge to talk a little bit about switching gears to the origin of FlyKit. This is one of the critical moments when you've partnered with a co-founder, right? Because a lot of the time before that, you were just building stuff on your own. How did that unfold, and how did you meet someone and you felt this is somebody who I trust to partner on all this creative output that I'm able to produce?
Yeah. I had actually met Andrew through a mutual friend of ours, Gautam, at a dinner he had in Boston. It seemed like a really cool guy. We aligned really well on just like the health and performance side of things. You know, he ran projects at the Department of Defense for biotech strategy and human performance optimization. It was like, you know, to me, like that was the coolest shit ever. And I was, you know, my bonus at BCG had just come in, and I was like, do I still want to keep doing this job? Like, do I want to like keep being a consultant, or do I want to like go build a company, or, you know, find a different job? And we had met for like sushi one time, and I was like, hey, like I'm actually he was working on Fount at that point in time, small staff of a bunch of ex-special operations military. Basically, the pitch for Fount was like, you sign up for Fount, we give you an ex-Ranger or Navy SEAL paired with you. We're going to analyze your blood work, your diet, your environment, your sleep, just everything that impacts your health and performance. And we will basically brute force you to success via supplements and everything from the boring stuff like meditation and breath work all the way to, you know, latest supplements and body scans and stuff like that. And I wanted to come in and basically make that scalable, because you can only, you know, there are only so many Navy SEALs out there that you could use as coaches, and so many people willing to pay $5K a month. Although Brian Johnson's $1 million a year plan is now proving out that there is actually a way bigger market than I thought. And so I initially joined Fount to scale out that product. And then what we discovered along the way was that, like, one, humans are really good at eliciting behavior from other humans, and AIs and digital coaches are not. And at the same time, everyone who's signing up for, $5K a month service, turns out they travel a lot because they're busy executives or because they can. And as soon as you are traveling, all the health stuff goes out the road. Because if you're eating clean at home, exercising, sleeping right, all the good stuff while you're on your normal routine, as soon as you're headed to Tokyo, you're enjoying like a 6 a.m. margarita in an airport bar, and you're not working out anymore, and you're eating out every night, and all the health stuff goes out the window. Along the way, we figured out how to send you anywhere in the world with no jet lag. And so this was kind of a direct ask from a lot of the clients because they're traveling a lot for business. It's like, okay, I'm going to Seoul tomorrow. I have a really hardcore negotiation I need to do. Koreans know how to weaponize jet lag because we'll take you out drinking the night before as soon as you fly in and make you do business the next morning. It's like, yeah, how do I stop myself from getting killed out there? And so we developed a protocol, very much by hand, by Excel early on, and we realized like, hey, there might actually be a commercial opportunity here. And so we built it out as an app and as, full direct consumer product. And, very quickly we discovered that that's a much easier product to build and sell, right? I could either do this low margin, super expensive concierge business where I need people on call 24/7 to deal with stuff from rich people. Or I could send you to a Shopify site where you buy a $99 product and then download an app. And my job is to just make sure that you keep buying more of these things over time. And that's a much easier business to be in. The revenue from FlyKit kind of quickly eclipsed the revenue from Fount. I was like, this should just be our business, and we should focus on travel because, like I said, everything in health goes out the window when you travel. And so can you make the travel experience healthier? And so within FlyKit, we also have FlyKit Pro. And so one feature, imagine Google Maps, but it reads all of the menus from your map, like near your map pin, and tells you where you should go and what to order at each restaurant based on your dietary needs and your food preferences. And then FlyKit Fit, you can scan any gym with your phone camera, it catalogs all the equipment, it knows who you are as an athlete, and then make sure that you're able to train in whatever hotel gym or random day pass gym that you have access to. Because what we found is a lot of times people's workouts would fail because they're like, I don't know the equipment here. I'm not familiar with this. I can't do a quarter of my program, so I'm just going to do whatever. And by eliminating that excuse, you're able to keep people on track with these relatively minor touches. And so really the purpose of FlyKit was to solve healthy travel and then try to bring that stuff back home. But where the industry kind of went in the intervening time period was you either needed a physical device or you need brick and mortar locations. The Equinoxes, the Whoops of the world really kind of own that space. You're seeing you saw a lot of private members only gyms and coaching situations and longevity plays kind of throughout the market. And then on the blood work side of things, you saw superpower and really function health take over things because it turns out when you have Quest Diagnostics on your cap table, you're able to offer labs at a lower price than anyone else, and so that's a very easy way to win that market. And so you kind of see a winner in the blood lab space already. And then we didn't want to go brick and mortar, we didn't want to do hardware, and so our niche that we chose is travel.
I have a few questions to follow up with on because you touched a few really fascinating points. You said AI is not very good at this as a direct coach, and that's more towards your original idea, but why not? And the reason, the lens for this question is your front end and your software is not complex. I suspect that I could just vibe code I could just clone you if I wanted to in a couple of days, purely on the software side. And a lot of other developers could probably do it faster than me. And yet I suspect that if they do it and they just ship it tomorrow, they're not all of a sudden going to have the revenue and the authority in the market that you have. So I'm curious, how do you think about supplementing AI to create Moat, which has been, at least in mid-February, which is when we're recording this, has been the topic of conversation a lot.
Yeah. So the dirty secret with a lot of the health coaching and stuff like that is I don't need special Huberman fine-tuned AI to do optimal health stuff. For 99% of the population, a relatively few boring interventions and the level of scientific knowledge that's already encoded into the model weights of like most any modern ChatGPT or Anthropic model is going to be sufficient to get you a lot healthier or more fit than where you currently are. And so anyone who says that they have like a knowledge moat is bullshitting you. The real hard part is that human behavior just like is hard to change. People are very much stuck in their habits. And the reason why like Fount worked as a product is because there's a Navy SEAL or Ranger or Green Beret at the other side of that Zoom call that like you have to explain to like why you don't feel spending 5 minutes in the morning meditating. Right? The human accountability, all the social cues, the desire for association, the fact that there's another human being there, the belief of authority that you ascribe to that other human being, and all the other like kind of micro touches that another human provides, and which is especially stronger in a live one-on-one in-person setting, is critical to drive behavior change. I'll straight up ignore AI coaches, right? I get notifications all day from random apps that I have, and my brain just filters them out. And so the hardest part of all of this is actually driving behavior change. Every once in a while, you'll get, some random like autist on Twitter that uploads all their blood work and Whoop data to fine-tune AI, and like this has changed my life, but like that's 1 in a million, and that's like more of a function of like their psychology being amenable to that rather than like someone who Mary Joe in middle America is not gonna be able to follow the advice of a digital health coach. You still, people, as much as I distrust the medical establishment, like, people still want to hear from doctors because there's a lot of authority attached to that MD and the fact that they're a human. And then there's also like a little bit of the notion of like, there's that quote from IBM, a machine can never be trusted to make decisions because it can never be held accountable. Basically, you can't fire a machine. You can't make them suffer when they do you wrong, and therefore you can't hold them accountable, and therefore they can't be trusted. Right? There's all these small psychological things that tell me that I don't need to do what this AI says. And it turns out, unless you're doing all the small human behavior stuff, like it doesn't matter how good your knowledge is. And at the end of the day, like most of this stuff is pretty boring. Like one of the, I guess, like funnest anecdotes I found that we saw was like, you can fix someone's life. They lost 30 pounds and they're sleeping better than ever and they're super focused, and they'll complain to you that the interventions you gave them weren't cool enough. Hey, I did this, all I did was sleep more and drink water and actually eat right, and it fixed all my problems, but I wanted those peptides. And if that's what you're complaining about, you didn't need to go that far, right? And so humans are hard. And that's also why, we didn't want to be in the coaching game for a long time, because, how do you make a machine solve that? How do you make the machine solve that, just something wasn't just straight up cool enough? A lot of times we had to, rebrand, the meditation and breath work to, tactical parasympathetic activation just to get people to buy into it. And so, to me, that's why AI coaches kind of all over the place will have trouble getting, product market fit or kind of long-term retention.
Do you think your authenticity to it as a fitness, as a knowledgeable person yourself, literally is kind of in the DNA of that business, and that's why you're gaining adoption? And I'm curious, how does that translate to the team? Do you only hire people that are also fit or that are health conscious?
I think it's helpful. Andrew is very much the face of the company, and he is someone who, to a fault, is honest and very transparent with where science is at, and has minimal charlatanry in anything that he does. And I think that's very helpful for bringing customers in. But I think where FlyKit really shines is not necessarily in the science, but the fact that it solves one very core problem at a time. We're going to make sure you can sleep when you're on your trip or coming back. bar none, we have a guarantee, and we have good science behind it, but it's really just the fact that like we're going to solve this problem for you guaranteed. That brings people in. And then same thing on like the food side. We're just going to tell you what to eat. We're going to solve this like very niche problem for you. I've done like podcast interviews and like otherwise. How would you expand this product? Like when you want to do like, full nutrition planning for people. Not all products have to become the everything app. Sometimes it just needs to be good at the thing it does and you just move on with your roadmap, right? So I'm very pleased with where those products are at today because it takes the problems that they're trying to solve, it knocks them out of the park, and then we move on to solving other problems.
I think that's music to Vidya's ears as a venture investor. Like, how much cleaner can it get?
Yeah, and on that topic, Clayton, just for context, like how big is your engineering team? Where are they located, distributed, or do they have a concentrated geographic presence?
So the engineering team, like maxed out at like the product engineering maxed out around 10 people with fully distributed with the kind of advent of AI coding, got it down to basically 3 people that can do everything. And then that was kind of the latest snapshot of FlyKit.
3 people that can do everything. That's excluding you and the CEO, I'd imagine.
Well, on the engineering side. And so including me and then 2 other engineers, so someone that fully owns the mobile interfaces, someone that fully owns the back end, and then I am kind of a glue layer between all the other stuff and also the algorithms development.
Got it. Going back to Mike's point, how do you think about the skill set that your core engineers have to bring to the table these days?
I'm still formulating what I would say is a mature opinion on this because we're in the middle of the fog of war here. And so on one extreme, I want everyone to be designers and can pump out, beautiful UIs by orchestrating a bunch of agents and all that stuff. At the same time, I need people who are deeply technical and can make the hard technical decisions so that various agents are able to work more effectively. I'm still formulating what is becoming a more nuanced opinion about what the future of tech talent looks like. I think on one end, you want people who are very multidisciplinary, right? Like you want designers, product people, engineers, kind of all in one that could ship very independently. And on the other side, you need people that are like hardcore, purely technical, that are making the harder technical architectural decisions to enable everyone else to move faster. But I think that right now we're over-indexing on prototype development. Right now, PMs are suddenly very excited because they're able to put together a functioning prototype and, deliver that to engineers to put into production. And what that doesn't really do is does all the hard PM stuff of deciding what's the right thing to build. The fact that the code was the most expensive part for, all of software lended itself really well to one important piece of this process, which was you had to spend a lot of time deciding and researching and deliberating on what is the right thing to build before hands go on keyboard. And now you could build anything and you could just sloptimize your way to putting products out there without a lot of thought and doing the hard work of deciding, is this thing desirable? Can I measure that well? When I put 10 of these things together, does that make a desirable, cohesive product versus I can just ship a bunch of these things? I think that's also one of the reasons why the SaaS Apocalypse we saw a couple weeks ago is overblown, because DocuSign's moat isn't the ability to sign a PDF on a website. Their moat is the fact that they have legal teams in every single country on the world that is ready to underwrite the fact that this is a legal signature, right? The actual interactions are pretty easy to replicate, but it's all of the underlying infrastructure and legal bullshit you have to go through. I think 11 Labs did a really good job with agent chatbots in that they're attaching insurance to it now. So it is a fully insured, certified call center bot, which is a completely different game to be in than something that could just talk to customers on the phone with your knowledge base, right? Suddenly you have something that, again, going back to that IBM quote, there's real accountability to making mistakes, and therefore it is more trustable. And I think we're going to see more and more of that in the industry. And then people who can think more in that realm become more important, because the ability to replicate a feature, just because I can put together a website where you can sign a PDF, does not make it DocuSign.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing from you is it's very interesting. So while you are still echoing the fact that it helps to be multi-threaded, so PMs being able to do prototypes and whatnot, you agree that is definitely relevant for this day and age, yet you're pointing out that two other critical skills are valuable for you and perhaps more broadly in the industry. One is, of course, the more deeply technical skills, which oftentimes can unblock teams and help people become even more productive to build newer stuff. That's one thing you called out. And the other piece is understanding the broader business context in which to build in. And you think that is an important skill set to have, which puts some developers above others.
Yeah, especially any industry that has any sort of regulatory or any sort of compliance bars, that is effectively the moat. And as any individual, your deep understanding of that becomes more important in an age where like anyone can build anything, at least at a surface level.
Makes sense.
Does that mean that the pressure internally for your team is going up? You mentioned 11 Labs. They were in the news recently because on Harry Stebbing's podcast, because their head of GTM basically said that it's a very tough, you have to generate your quota, which is 20x your salary, and it's a very meet the quota or out culture. And I think on the engineering side, we're seeing some similar teams becoming more full stack, less need for certain specialists, people expected to produce more code. Are you seeing some of that? Are you driving some of that? How do you engage with what an engineer on your team looks like now with Opus 4.6 out and in the future?
For my teams and the teams that for the companies that I'm working with and advising, on the engineering and product side, definitely pushing a lot more velocity. If you don't have the basic AI competence to be running, a couple Claude Code sessions simultaneously, working on stuff and staying organized between them, I'm sorry, like you've fallen behind where just the industry is at. But at the same time, like different, I guess, cross-discipline needs are exposing themselves, where you suddenly need a very good designer on the team. Like, even though AIs can build front end, like they build front ends that all kind of look the same. Like before it was that like stupid purple gradient on every vibe coded app. Now it's that like stupid italic serif font that is everything that Gemini has ever touched. Like suddenly it looks like that. And you need an individual that has a strong design opinion that can reinstall taste back into what's being built. And I don't mean taste from the current Twitter discourse. Taste is the only mode. Literally being able to express an opinion and manifest it across all the various product surface areas. And whether or not that opinion is good or bad, ideally you hire someone who can make good opinions, but taste is subjective. But the ability to coordinate that and have that be cohesive is very much a developable skill set. And that's something that I am actively kind of like hiring for, because it's table stakes now that every PM can load up Claude Code and build a front end prototype of something. It's another to have that design and kind of like the small touches that make a product feel real and delightful that's hard to quantify and is able to communicate that kind of all around. And the same thing on the architectural side. Someone who can think at a systems level and can make the hard decisions and trade-offs of what tools to use, what it is, the service descriptions, what are the contracts between them, because AI will just write stuff and it'll possibly work, but it isn't thinking 10 steps ahead, and you still very much need those people.
How do you hire for that, or how do you interview for that?
That is a very, very hard question that I'm still figuring out the answer to, because like I said, this has all been in the last 60 to 90 days that this has all been happening. A quarter ago, I would have been happy if you knew how to use Cursor and could pump out PRs faster than everyone else. Now the bar has moved. If you don't have 5 bots pushing 5 PRs a day, then I don't even want to talk to you. But now I have to suddenly evaluate for your ability to manage executives and get buy-in on a design system and micro interactions and all that stuff. And so that's an evolving bar and an evolving like evaluation method that I'm still working on.
Are whiteboard interviews coming back? I'm the biggest opponent of whiteboard interviews that has ever lived, maybe. But now I'm like, is that the only way to actually assess a person without an AI being involved and to just see their core cognitive capability?
I think so. One, you kind of like want the in-person whiteboard interview just to make sure that you don't have some bot that you're a North Korean bot that you're about to hire for a job. So that's always helpful. But two, like I think to some extent, because I no longer like care if someone is really, really good at Python, I can work on the service, but their ability to communicate ideas, get buy-in from the team, and just frankly see their ability to explain something that they're passionate about. Like I've always loved whiteboard interviews where they just teach me something that they care about rather than I don't care if you can invert a tree or whatever. Especially now, I don't need if you can fine-tune a model from scratch to leak code hard, great, I'm impressed, and that's a different technical bar that I'm going after for a different skill set. But otherwise, I'm looking for your ability to express what you're trying to do in a very clear way, and then attach that human emotion and energy to it to make sure that the rest of the org and the rest of the team is along for the ride with you.
Clayton, allow me to just say that you actually made my day, and you too, Michael, by bringing about whiteboarding, but I didn't know you hated it so much. I never had a PM job where I didn't actually have to whiteboard, and that usually was my most favorite part because I felt I could always communicate way more effectively using pictures, and I felt my energy always came out that way. Maybe I could become employable as a PM again, so you gave me hopes.
Well, I only have one question as we're closing here. I gotta ask, Clayton, I used to, in my first company, have beer around 5 p.m. and then I would have a few really smooth coding hours from 5 to 8, as the emails died down. And at the peak of it, I probably did that 5 times a week. And now it doesn't seem like such a good idea from what we know about alcohol. So what's the next best thing for a developer or any kind of builder that wants to have that hack for productivity, but doesn't necessarily want to play too many games with their health?
Ooh, that's a very good question, because I think everyone's always looking for what is the edge. The thing you lose out on not having the office keg is you no longer have that hangout where post work, you're done with meetings, you grab a beer with the boys, and you talk to you. Sometimes magic happens during that time, and so it's really sad to see that go. I don't drink anymore because of the health stuff. And when you think about it, alcohol is just a low ROI drug, right? If you're purely looking for substances that can help you,
and you can't say sleep and water.
Yeah, I know. My go-to was always psilocybin, small doses. I used to plan my entire week around my Sunday training, where I would basically spend the week just trying to grind through my training, suffer at it, be bad at straps or whatever. And then Sunday comes, I would take, a small dose of mushroom chocolate. I would get on my steer wheel, get myself into a nice flow state, and then to spend the next 4 hours throwing myself at the hardest tricks I know. And that's when I made the biggest jumps in my skill set, just because of that ability to hyper focus and get rapid feedback on what I'm doing, while my brain was just primed to kind of learn and do stuff. And if you can do that while managing multiple contexts now, I think that's doable. I think it's harder to get into a flow state with agentic coding because you're suddenly jumping around between multiple hard problems versus if you're going deep on a problem and you're in the code and you got that loaded into your brain context, you're able to get into a flow state and make that magic happen. I have yet to kind of get there with agentic coding because you're not going as deep into a problem and you're bouncing around too much, and you're not in that core zone of the right frequency of stimulus at the right level of effort and difficulty to keep you super engaged. Now I actually have to find stuff to do while I'm waiting for agents to finish. If I don't want to have more than 3 going at a time, I actually picked lock picking back up just so that I have something relatively short to do. I literally have a lockpick set here on my desk, working my way through a bunch of padlocks while I wait for agents to finish. And so I don't have like a good answer for like agentic coding because like
I think that was
the
a
flow
great
state's very
answer,
different.
Because you're talking about, I think a lot of us default to scrolling while we wait for an agent to finish. And that, if anything, that actually reduces your cognitive capacity to be effective in that session. So I love that tip that you just gave.
Yeah, I tried doing a physical book, but TikTok has destroyed my ability to read physical books, and so that becomes very hard. Audiobooks, like things that you like start and stop aren't great, but like something that I can immediately pick up and put down, 20 seconds later, I think is the real hack here. And so, I've worked my way up the chain from easier to more difficult locks at this point. This was a skill I was good at 20 years ago that I realized I got kind of bad at. And so, all right, great. I'm going to work my way up the belts of locks again. But yeah, I feel as though like this is the prime time for developers to like start crocheting and stuff like that.
I saw some people do that in an office a couple of weeks ago in San Francisco. That's cool.
Yeah, because you kind of want something that you could stay in the zone between your Codex or Claude Code pings, but you don't want. I was finding myself doom scrolling on Twitter constantly, and it was just getting way too much screen time on top of other screens going. And so, like, great, I need something that I can do with my hands. If I can find a substance that will make that also easier, I'm happy to also try that. But this is so far the hack that I found.
That's more than what I asked for. This is great. Thank you, Clayton. This has been super fun.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.